Hey guys, what's cracking? So I decided, you know what? Let's continue doing these reviews for premium selection, right? Because the first couple were hype, and the next few were actually also pretty hype as well. So I was like, why not? My opinion is exactly going to be quite as strong as with the Shoutout reveals. Although there are a couple things that I'm like, good support, right? But aside from that, I thought, hey, let's give my crack at it. I know like a dozen other YouTubers going to be doing it as well, but hey, who knows? Maybe by this point, a couple people like the sound of my voice. Or I'm just wasting my time. But hey, you know what? At least I enjoy wasting my time. So let's look at the Dimension Police reveals to start with. And so they've got Cosmo Winger Unibird Galaxy. Okay, name. So this one, surprise, surprise, is in English, and that's because Different Fight himself revealed these, which, I mean, come on. If he was going to reveal any clan, it had to be Dimension Police. That's his bread and butter, right? It's his heart and soul. So these guys are in English, so whoosh, we can actually look at the card in order to get its effects. And it's got two of them. So the first one is continuous on Van. This unit gets plus 10k for each card in your damage zone on your rear circle. So that's already pretty big. Now, of course, I look at that and like, yeah, okay, it's a really nice buff up, but we'll get back to it later. So the second effect is Burst. That's important. We'll get into that a bit later as to why Burst is important, but when this unit attacks, you flip a card from your G-Zone, and if it's 50k or greater power, then it gets a crit. But it also gets plus 2 drive if it's 100,000 or greater power. I looked at that and I lost it. Plus 2 drive? Why? Why plus 2? So, as a package, this thing is pretty nuts. So, there's no generation break thing at all here. And the fact that it flips up a card from the G-Zone means that you can flip up our good friend, our old pal, Geomaglass. So, in terms of those being combined together, and the fact that getting a bunch of 10Ks is easy because it's just damage on a rear guard, so you can, even if you have no damage, this thing can get plus 50k power just by calling down a field. But of course, with things like Commander Laurel and Force Markers and whatnot, getting it over 100,000 might take a little bit of effort if you don't have a lot of cards in the damage zone, but I assume you might have a couple, so this thing's really good as a first stride. Is it better than Geomaglass? It depends. Geomaglass is better as a defensive option, but I think it depends. But regardless, this is such a good option. And that burst effect in particular means you can use it with Linka. And Linka is a stand trigger which gives a sort of Sentinel Guard punishment. And that's really important because, again, crits, plus 2 drive. And can I just say about the plus 2 drive, Dimension Police tends to have a problem when it comes to having card economy and being able to guard a lot of attacks. This really helps with that. Like, I mean, plus 2 drive without having to pitch anything or get rid of anything is pretty nuts, dude. That's an easy plus 2, and it's in the best form of a plus 2, which is drive check. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's good stuff all around. Unibird Galaxy, I'm not sure how many copies you run. I'd be inclined to say that because it's the generic Lipper, you could just as easily run 1, but I can imagine that you'd run 2 as well. I mean, you'd have to think about, okay, between this and then also between this and, okay, so Geomaglass is one thing, but then what about Bravest Peak Excalibur, right? Because that thing also gets big, but that one has restanding is the thing. This one doesn't have restanding, but the fact that it gets like 2 extra drive and a crit, and it can also get big, you have to negotiate like, okay, so which one's better? I think as a rule of thumb, and this is just my impression, if you're going for Force 2, you probably want to stick with like Excalibur once you hit Generation Break 3. But if you're going Force 1, this thing is actually a pretty good option for that because it has the crit going for it anyway. And Excalibur can't really say the same. And if you are running things like Linka, then your crit count's a little bit lower because you're running those stand triggers to compensate. And I suppose it's a moot point if you hit your over trigger. But yeah, that said, I think that's sort of a rule of thumb. You're probably going to run both anyway because, to be quite frank, the space for your G-Zone in Dimension Police is not that tight. I mean, really, if power creep comes along, you're just fine with shoving things out. I mean, really, Geomaglass and Excalibur was like your 2 big ones, right? So this one's just like a good straight up third option, and also just the fact that it doesn't require any CB whatsoever is really good, because damage denied can be a thing, especially since you want to call down your grade 3 heal guardian from hand. And one reason why you wouldn't want to do that is because, hey, guess what? As is tradition, we've got ourselves a heal guard. I mean, a G guard. So this G guard is kind of the nuts. So what does it do? When it's put on Guardian Circle, you Soul Blast 1, and you choose up to 2 grade 3 cards, normal units specifically, from your drop, and you put them in your hand. For each one you put in your hand, it gets 5k shield. I can't fathom why it even needed the shield. It could have just had the +2 effect. Again, more plussing, and it's for the most important grade, which is grade 3. And grade 3s have so many uses to them, right? Of course, in Dimension Police, they're shields, because things like Dieliner and Geomag last. So, I mean, heck, they're bare minimum probably going to be like anywhere from 15 to 20, and then they go up from there. But on top of that, they're stride fodder. You can ride them. They can be used for ultimate stride as well. They can be rear guards. Really, anything goes. You can add back your Dizauruses, your Kaisers. You can add like Persona Blasts of Dieliner, because I'm going to assume that's the one you want to stay on for the most part. There's so much you can do here. This thing is low-key. This thing might be a tad bit busted, because it's just a Soul Blast. It's just a Soul Blast, and it gets to be a 25 shield on top of that? Bro. Yeah, impeccable. There's no flaws to this. The only thing that I can say, and this isn't even a flaw, this is what keeps it from being, like, bannable, is the fact that it says normal units for your grade 3, so you can't just loop back your grade 3 heal triggers. But that's not, like, a downside. That's, like, a necessity at this point. So, yeah, Gamelgos, I didn't even say his name, and now you see why I butchered it like a mother effer. Yeah, this thing's impeccable, absolutely flawless. And yeah, so Dimension Police, eating quite well. Let's move on over to the next cards. Alright, and we're back. So, next up, we've got DI, which, ooh, I'm really excited for. I was really excited for these guys, right? Because I'm like, okay, so what do we give to DI at this point? What does DI need? And spoiler alert, they got something really, really useful here. So, we've got Abyss King of the Ultimate End, FourthFall. Yeah, DI is increasingly taking on the naming convention of the DDD monsters, or particularly the extra deck monsters. I mean, even some main deck monsters were really epic, right? And honestly, that's a thumbs up to me. Those had some sickest ass names in the game. And translates over here. So, FourthFall, what does he do? So he's got 2 effects. First is auto from G-Zone, the spice begins. At the end of the battle where your grade 3 Vanguard attacked an opponent's Vanguard that is grade 3 or greater, if your Vanguard is grade 3, seems redundant, and your soul has 13 or more cards, that cursed number, which is a staple in a lot of versions, Counterblast 1, discard 5 Cinco from your hand, and stride this from face down of your G-Zone to VC stand. This wording's a little bit weird, but basically you stride it from face down G-Zone. So, let me just do the second effect. When this unit is placed on Van Circle, which we find out why, if you have 13 or fewer cards up in your deck, there's the 13 again, choose up to 3 critical triggers from your soul and shuffle them into your deck. Yeah. Okay, so there's a bit to digest with FourthFall here. Immediately, some people might be having the Raging Fall effect and say, oh, you counterblast and discard 5. This is trash. This is terrible. It's not. Here's the thing. So this thing does so much for you. First off, it's a multi-attack. It's a multi-attacking Vanguard, which DI already had that thanks to Blader Mouse, and also you can do some NLK shenanigans in Premium. But yeah, it has a multi-attacking Vanguard, but this multi-attack is so crucial because, fellas, DI has joined the club. And what do I mean by the club? I mean that some clans in Premium have strides that either copy the effects of the hard card, or you can stride them after the stride step, or they can leave from the Vanguard circle and allow your Vanguards to be your Vanguards again, your grade 3s. So this club I'm talking about is the club of clans where your grade 3 ride target actually has their skills relevant despite you striding over them. Yeah, this joins that club now, and Dark Irregular needed to join that club because you know how many like insane cards DI has from V? You know, we've got Vega Steel. That thing was busted, especially with Strike Steel, who's now banned. We have Shoutout, which can abuse the hell out of this. We've got Amon. Amon can use this now. And so much more stuff, right? There's a lot of delicious possibilities with the DI grade 3s. Like they're designed, from the V perspective, they're designed to really kick ass with a lot of cards in Soul, and this thing having 13 or more cards in Soul requirement, I mean, that just is checking that you're doing what the deck wants to do. So it totally feels synergistic. Now, of course, discard 5, just to circle back to that, feels like it's something that's hard to negotiate, but bear with me here, right? So you're attacking with your grade 3 Vanguard. You get your twin drive, so that's +2. Then you pitch 5, so you've negged 3. In order to stride into Vorfox. But then Vorfox is just going to immediately swing and triple drive. So you've given up 5 cards, but you've obtained 5 cards by having 5 drives. Now, to be fair, this is still a neg 2 because at bare minimum, unless something changes, people should expect a +2 from their Vanguard, right? Either by having their grade 3 attacking a twin drive, or in the case of a stride, you've pitched a card in order to go into the stride, but then it compensates by giving you a triple drive. So -1 but +3 equals +2. This is a neg 2 in that sense, but it's kind of a finisher option, and I think that's very clearly indicated by the fact that you can choose 3 crit triggers from the Soul, just throw them back in the deck, and that effect in particular makes it very apparent that this is going to be competing with Bledermaus, and Bledermaus is a restanding Vanguard that can shuffle back a lot of your grade 0s into the deck. So this is very Bledermausy, right? You know, it's all there. You've got the Vanguard multi-attack, you've got the deck recycle, and all that jazz. So now the question becomes which one is better, right? So Bledermaus, you do actually have good card economy with Bledermaus, surprisingly. It's better card economy wise than Vorfox is. And on top of that, you have the potential to shuffle back a ton of grade 0s into the deck, which usually includes the grade 0 starter, funnily enough, but we're not going to talk about that, right? That's not relevant to this discussion. So yeah, you're putting back a lot more into the deck. So it's a better recycler, and it's a restandard that's superior in terms of economy. So that's what it's got going for it. But what does Vorfox have going for it? Well, the fact of the matter is that Vorfox can really allow you to do other DI shenanigans, right? When you stride into Bledermaus, that's what you're doing, right? You know, you're just having the minor little buffs to a couple of your units and the restand with the recycle. That's all you're doing. Vorfox allows you to have delicious options prior to that, so you can do Amon, right? And do the bunch of the Amon stuff, which may be what you need to get into 13 more cards in Soul. And because it's at the end of the battle, Amon, who's big as hell, gets the extra crits, has the extra like 10, 20, 30, whatever power. Yeah, you get to do that and then go into this guy, right? I think my personal favorite is Shoutout because Shoutout has both of its effects being first at the beginning of the battle phase, and then when it attacks to have double restand, you buff your entire front row, and then you get the Mordred Phantom type effect, which ultimately means you get 6 attacks in a turn, and your front row is buffed, so, and you're shuffling back critical triggers. So yeah, that's very aggressive as hell. It's a good push. And then Gasteel, right? So V Gasteel's effect applies at the beginning, and to my recollection, because of the nature of the effect, V Gasteel is kind of a blanket effect. Like it occurs, it's static, it's just there now. So even if you stride over it, those effects don't fade away. So your opponent still goes down to 1 power, you get a front row, like your front row gets a crit, maybe they have to put a card for any damage, whatever, right? So yeah, if you hit like 20 or whatever, then you go into this really just pushes the V Gasteel agenda of like killing them dead. So yeah, like literally it just works with a lot of the grade 3s that DI had in the V era, and it makes them good. So whereas Bledermaus is probably superior in terms of like the basics of recycle and restand. This one allows for way more, I guess I would just call it wombo combo. So yeah, you can combo a lot with FourthFall. This is amazing, right? You know, giving more multi-attack, and you know, I'm repeating myself, right? This is cool. I totally see DI decks running this, like 100%. I think DI have space in their G zone. They definitely have a lot of space. I mean, when you really look at it, what are you gonna be running in DI, right? You're probably gonna be running 4-bladed mouse. You're probably gonna be running some G guards, and we're gonna be talking about another potential addition to G guards in a second, right? But you're also gonna be running potentially the Xerox Dragon, potentially the Progenitor. Those are debatable. But yeah, really outside of Blade of Mouse, the only other card that is a stride that I can think would be in most people's G zone would be, what was his name? Balam. One Who Had Souls Balam. Yeah, I can see like a couple Balams in there. But yeah, so this is all to say you got space for it. Anyway, let's not waste too much more time. Moving on to Storm Princess of Mayhem, Nerjavis. You know, honestly, you had me with the title, but the actual name Nerjavis just kind of hit different. So, what does she do? So, Nerjavis, and let me scroll down a little bit here. Okay. So, it has one skill, which is when it's placed on the Guardian Circle, as is appropriate for a G-Guard, you counterblast one, and for every 10 cards in your soul, you choose one of your opponent's units and you get -1 crit until the end of the turn. Now, it gives a little reminder text here that if you have 20 or more cards in soul to units, gets -1 crit, and that's just to show that, yeah, you can choose like different units and whatnot. What do I think about this card? I think it's pretty good. You know, it is pretty good. It doesn't like immediately strike me as, brilliant, very magnifique, right? Quite like a Warfox does. But Nerjavis is still cool, right? Nerjavis kind of has a similar effect to what I think is Zero. I mean, I kind of consider it the Zero effect now. I know that's more of a recent card, but he just kind of reminds me of that, right? You know, you just minusing crit. Although actually Zero makes some Zero crit, so that's potentially superior. It should be superior, right? But anyway, that's beside the point. So it is cool because it's sort of like an alternative to defending, right? You make attacks fizzle out regardless of power unless they're like super high crit. But it requires like 10 cards a piece just to activate. So the threshold between minusing 1 crit to 1 unit and 2 is really vast. I mean, that's really the difference between just being online for most effects and being in Castile range. Like, there's a discrepancy there. So I don't really imagine, unless it's the very late game, I don't imagine you like popping up the 20 cards and soul thing. But if you do, then in the very late game, this is perfect, right? Because let's keep in mind, the -1 critical is until the end of the turn, and you're choosing 2 of these units. So if they've got restanders, then this especially hurts, but at the very least, you're kind of getting more bang for your buck, right? You can invalidate any number of attacks, really, right? Because at bare minimum, if you get the 20, then you're kind of invalidating 2 attacks for the most part, unless they have crit. But then if the course, like I said before, they're restanding, then that's even more value for this. And of course, this can stack, right? If you put 2 of them, you can CP2, but Counterblast is kind of a tough cost because a lot of cards in DI Counterblast, I think we'd be here forever if I tried to list all of them. But yeah, so this is a good defender, but it's not some game-breaking thing. Will it go into DI G zones? That is a very, 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 very good question. There's so many good DI G Guardians. It's one of the ones that actually have the better lineup of G Guardians in the game. I think they might actually have more than like the average, but maybe that's just like me not remembering, right? But yeah, you got things like Vincent, Druzhnas, Saint-Germain, you know, like so many good ones. So where does this fall in line with that? I think it's worthy of experimentation, and in particularly, I think the very high turbo decks, you're going to be seeing this because the turbo decks are going to be so hell-bent on turboing so much, they're probably going to use a lot of hand advantage. So in a simplified game state, this is king because you're getting so much defending, quote-unquote, by minusing the crits without having to use extra cards in your hand, which you probably just committed to your game plan. So yeah, I think in those variants, this is going to be a lot more prevalent. So yeah, DI, super thumbs up. These guys, yeah, they're eating really well. I will admit Dimension Plays may be a little bit higher because their G guards downright like it's the first one I can see straight up being kind of busted, but Vorfox as a stride it's the shiznit. It might be my favorite one so far, to be real. Alright, so we got one more today, which is Great Nature, so let's go on over. Alright, back again, and we've got Great Nature reveals. Not really one of the ones I was so excited for, but I was like, you know, I got Dimension Plays, I got DI, I was both really excited for them, and why ignore this at this point, right? It's very similar to like Narukami, why ignore it? So we've got Omniscience Dragon, Caradorius, which is a parrot. Fun little artwork there, right? So what does the parrot do? So he's got two skills, right? The first one is an act on Van. You flip up a card from your G zone and you choose all of your rear cards in the front row, they get power plus 10, and then they retire at the end of the turn. Typical Great Nature fashion. Second skill is auto on Van. When it attacks, you CB1, and then you choose one of your rear guards with 30k or more power, and not only does it stand, but it gets the skill that when it attacks, if your opponent would call cards from hand to the Guardian Circle, they have to call 3 or more at the same time. And this effect applies until the end of the turn. So at first I wasn't too impressed by it, but having discussed it with a couple of Great Nature folks, not many of them, but just like one or two, this is actually grown on me a little bit. This in combination with things like Rhino is pretty nuts, because then you can get like 3 attacks with this Crystal Luster / Chain Ranker Guard Restrict, and because it's like 30k, you would think, oh well, 30k, you know, that's kind of big. It's not that big for Great Nature. They buff up a lot, and with Rhino, I hear it's almost essentially free even on Excel 2. Like, it's really easy to fulfill. So yeah, this is easy. So because you're swinging 3 times and you're demanding like 3 cards if you would guard it, like, yeah, that's pretty devastating. Nectar of Sensationalism is very key here, because you've got a guaranteed crit potentially for whatever you're restanding and multi-attacking with for this. So it's got a crit, it's got 3 or more. That all combines to say your opponent's going to be hurting. There's it's got like a sort of a Zoa feel, but it's less expensive, but it's also not really as big. And that's a trade-off. I mean, 30k is not some super insurmountable number, and as we've seen with a lot of these new G-Guards coming out, yeah, the clans are having ways to deal with something like this. So it's still cool though. The fact that you're giving 10k to the front row, especially for just a flip, that already makes it really easy. But you are retiring them at the end of the turn, so you know, if you get extra draws from them, you're good to go. I mean, that is Great Nature fashion, but I think in decks like Isabel, that might not be quite as simple, so this is a little bit rough. And it's funny that I mentioned Isabel, because the G-Guard actually feels more like an Isabel card. So we've got Omniscience Dragon, I'm not saying that. So it's a G-Guard, and it's got 1 effect, but it's kind of a beefy effect. So auto, when it's placed on Guardian Circle, you counterblast 1. Becoming more of a tradition for these G-Guards to have a counterblast requirement somewhere in there. You discard the top card of your deck, and then you apply the effects based on the type of card. So normal unit, it gets shield plus 20k, good. Trigger unit, choose one of your units, cannot be hit until the end of that battle. So hey, take your pick, man. Would you opt for a beyond critical sentinel number, or just a PG? It's basically like it's a sentinel. Both of the types in fact roll into 1, but it is a CB cost, which I don't know how harsh that is for Great Nature. I think it depends on the variant. Great Nature isn't very like linear, no, not linear, like organized in terms of like their playstyles and like their needs and their excels. But anyway, so yeah, when it comes down to it, this is actually really cool. Some people were like, you know, I don't know if I want to like lottery from the G-Guard, but this isn't really as lottery as you think it is, right? Because at bare minimum, like this is how you've got to think of this G-Guard for it to become really good. At bare minimum, so I get the CB for it, this is going to be a 35k guard, which is more than the Narukami G-Guard can say, right? Like the Narukami G-Guard that we just got, like that thing could be lower, you know, it's up to the opponent. This, the opponent doesn't say jack shiznit about it, right? So at bare minimum, it's that. So if this is like all you need to guard with, then throw it out there, you've done the job. Let's say though, you're guarding something kind of bigger, right? Like they're swinging at you for like a 50 something attack. you throw this down and then you play the lottery. So if you get the 20k, then yeah, okay, you'll probably have to throw another card, but you've already thrown in a really beefy shield that you probably had to throw in for that attack. So it's fine, right? You know, you have other cards to compensate for it. But if you high roll, then congrats, friend, you don't need to do anymore because you've just perfect guarded it, and that attack is null and void now. So yeah, like really, it's all gravy from here. Like if you're fine with this bare minimum of the normal unit, then you're all good. And that's not even to mention that with Isabel, like they excel in the lottery, and you just kind of win the lottery regardless with Isabel. So yeah, this is a pretty fantastic G-Guard. I am more hyped for this G-Guard than I am for this Stride, in all honesty, which I think was kind of how I was for the Shadow Paladin reveals. But yeah, I mean, hey, why not, right? These G-Guards so far, they're essentially like 5 for 5. There isn't a G-Guard that I would say I don't like. They all feel like they can be ran. Some can, moreover, than some that are just like a staple, like the Shadow Paladin one, and the Dimension Police one is the definite staple. So yeah, that'll do it for my review here of today's cards. Let me know what you think. Is there anything I missed? Are these more powerful than I'm giving them credit for? Am I giving them a bit too much credit and they're just like, whatever? I doubt the latter more, because I think everything I pointed out is pretty much objective for the most part. But I mean, hey, you know, feel free to prove me wrong, right? Yeah, I look forward to the next reveals. I think Aqua Force is coming on the 8th, so kind of looking forward to that. Whenever Commander Jaime does the reveal, right? Like, that's going to be really good. So, yeah, these are flying by really quick, so expect a lot more of these videos if I feel up to it. With that, thank you. God bless.